Tonight on It's Spoilerin Time, The Shield, Season 3, Episode 5, Better Call Saul, Episode 7, the entire run of The House of Cards. But we lead off with Brian Brushwood and Anthony Carboni and their thoughts on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Brian.
I want real bad to like it a lot. I'm going to say some words that are going to make some people hate me, but what I'm hearing about the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is that, oh my God, it fills the hole left in my heart by 30 Rock not being around anymore. Now, I've heard nothing but great stuff about 30 Rock. I've seen bits and pieces of episodes, but if this really fills that hole, I don't know that I'm going to watch 30 Rock now, because the pacing is ploddy. Like, there's brief moments. I think I chuckled once. It's just so structured. It's so, and now it's time for the callback, and now it's on rails. It's very primetime network television, and I don't know that it does it for me. There were very few surprises for me in there.
How far in did you get? Did you watch the whole run, or what did you do?
Well, I watched all of episode 1, episode 2, and episode 4. Episode 1 was painful. It was like it had first episode syndrome, where it's like, and now it's time for us to explain the conceit, and now it's time for us to introduce this character, and now it's time for us to show off this set, which you'll see a lot because we spent money on it. Episode 2 was more relaxed, at least. Episode 4 had a joke that I laughed at, It just feels a little bit like that Saturday Night Live, two people standing next to each other, not looking at each other, reading from cue cards off camera structure. There's so much goddamn structure in the show, and it's very difficult for me to embrace that.
Yeah, I could see that. It definitely goes according to that very, like, 3-act UCB, like, long-form improv, like, here's how you do a show. Like, and you kind of let it go on rails because because that's
what we do, right? Yes. No, and again, I want to get past it. And there were, like, I thought the whole idea of Spider-Man, and to be honest, my favorite part of the 4th episode was in the credits, listening to the fact that they wrote an entire song to run over it about how he would be the only remaining Spider-Man of the Spider-Men.
Yes.
That was great.
So good. And I'll tell you what, like, I think they lean on that structure, and they lean on that being on rails for the early episodes quite a bit. And then I think once they kind of get the hang, because the other thing they do with shows like 30 Rock or shows from this kind of like school of comedy is they feel out what the performer wants to do with the character. And then once they get like 3 or 4 episodes in, they're like, okay. And then it starts to get like a little sillier and a little looser.
Then they start to write to the strengths. So
yeah.
where it's like somewhere in there is what the character wants to be and the character and what the show wants to be, and then they're able to play to it.
And I thought even though it was structured, those beginning episodes had enough bits that really kind of did crack me up to carry me through while they found their legs. Especially, I think, like, did you get to the, oh man, I'm trying to remember what 1, 2, 3, and 4 were, because it's like all a blur from binge watching.
And that's always the problem with the binge watching, right? Is trying to separate out all the stuff. Because I sent, after watching episode 4, I sent a text to Brian saying, or actually I think it was on Twitter, like, this is the litmus test episode. I think if you like this one, you probably want to keep watching, and if you don't, you just bail.
Oh, episode 4 was the. I'm sorry, I just remembered. Episode 4 is the plastic surgery episode.
Yeah.
Right.
You didn't laugh at the end of that with her at the office? Thinking she was giving the soliloquy, and then it shows and she's like falling over?
Yeah, no, it was clever. I mean, I laughed. I don't know. I think the roommate character is my favorite.
For sure.
Again, it just felt laborious, where it's like, for example, it was funny to have to set up the runner of the landlord saying something that sounded sentimental and on point, and it turns out she's answering a question for Jeopardy or for whatever game show's on. Unfortunately, like, that was a laboriously long 3 sets of sentences that it's like a slow motion payoff on a joke. I don't know. It's structure. So much damn structure.
But here's what they do with that structure that's really good, and it's something that, like, Arrested Development does with that structure. And they really took advantage of the ability to binge watch it, because all that structure builds and builds and builds. And I think they really took it as this season is one thing. And so if you watch the whole season, it's eventually going to layer on itself so much that all these little callbacks and details and things all begin working together in a way that's really, really funny.
So here's what I'm going to suggest or hypothesize, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this. The same structure that I'm decrying in this is the strength of Arrested Development, the fact that they would do nested callbacks and bits and all this stuff. However, at a base level, I could watch Arrested Development in Latin and still find moments of it genuinely hilarious because of their interaction with each other. The characters, the way they deliver is just so on point. I don't know that I've ever felt that for any bit of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. It seems like absent the writing, there's nothing for me to latch onto.
Yeah, and you felt that way about Martin Short too.
That part was so good.
I could really tell it was supposed to be funny. He was definitely wearing a hilarious rubber mask.
Just did it. So this is my theory,
Even
right?
the part where he does this and he can talk normal.
Oh
Come
yeah,
on.
where he pinched his lips together.
Yeah.
I thought that was clever. That was clever. Yes.
Because episode 4 for me was the one where I'm like, and here's exactly why I think we're illustrating my point. I laughed a couple times. I laughed at the Spider-Man, like the too many Spider-Man thing. I thought the Martin Short bit was brilliant. I love the bit where she has the moment where you realize, oh, she thinks she's saying that, but this is what she's really saying. And I'm like, okay, I actually laughed at this episode. I'm gonna keep going. And then it just started steamrolling and it started layering. And there's little bits that you don't catch that you have to rewind. Like, wait a minute, what did she say there? What did he say there? And it builds and builds and builds. But I don't think any of those pay off if you're having the Brian Brushwood reaction of, yeah, that was kind of funny, because you don't care. And you have to care for it to pay off later.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
I think that's the thing is like when you think about the Netflix only season of Arrested Development, which is brilliant for all of its layering and it's brilliant for the storytelling and it's blah, 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 blah. The first 6 episodes of that season of Arrested Development were the weakest 6 episodes of Arrested Development. They
Agreed.
were hard to watch until you started putting together that everything was linking together. I think that Kimmy Schmidt works at least on an episode by episode level as well as any other sitcom while setting up that layering. I think they really learned a lot from that sort of slow pace of season 4 of Arrested Development.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. To me, I keep thinking of, and again, it's going to sound like I'm dissing it. I'm not dissing it. I want to love it, and I'll continue to watch more of it. But there's a King of the Hill episode where Bobby takes comedy lessons at the community college, and he learns about the structure of comedy and about what, X, Y, and Z, and then and writes this thing, and he's about to do it in front of all the high school, and then and his dad shows up. He's like, "Just be funny, be yourself," and so he starts making fart sounds and dancing around all funny, and then everyone starts laughing, and the community college teacher is saying like, "Don't accept their laughter, Bobby, it's ill-informed." And it's like, I feel like this is the show that guy wanted to watch, because it's
oh God, no, I don't think so at all. I mean, I take your point, but I don't think this show is like trying really hard to fit a form. I just don't think that it's making the jokes within the structure that you want. I would apply what you're saying there more to that Netflix season of Arrested Development, where they were like carefully crafting something. I don't think Kimmy Schmidt is trying to be overly like, you have to be an informed and appreciator of comedy to get it.
No. I think it play. There's the mind, and then there's the gut, and good comedy plays to both. I think that at some base level, Arrested Development scooped me in just on both levels at once, and it's brilliant for those reasons. I feel like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is a little more up here and a little less down here, and I'd like to see a little more down here to just like that was a very funny take on an animal level that I can't really explain.
Well,
And I think it
that's
gets
what
there.
I got for the first time in episode 4. And then I got more in episode 5 and more in episode 6, where I'm like, oh, I don't have to think to laugh at this show.
Well, I'll keep going. So we'll see if it takes me.
You just didn't
2
find it
people
funny
in
is what
chat,
I'm hearing.
I want to point out, 2 people in chat are saying, Nancy is saying you got to look at it as a cartoon, like it's a live action cartoon, which I think is the best way to look at it, because the last season of 30 Rock was very much that way too. And I think this is very much like watching, Kimmy Schmidt is like watching Animaniacs. Like that's what Kimmy Schmidt is. And I think it's like super a little too overly clever trying in the beginning. And then once you get into the characters and you're like, here come the pigeons that talk like gangsters. And here comes the weird skeleton guy. And here's the dog with the idiot girl. And like, once you like, okay, I'm in the structure and I expect the structure. Yeah. That's when they start pulling it apart in really stupid ways.
I look forward to that moment. I hope it overtakes me.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, and I don't know that it's worth it for you to keep watching it.
I'll watch episode.
I don't
9.
think you deserve it.
No, that's not what I'm trying to say.
I don't think you deserve the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying I don't think it'll get better for you if you weren't finding it funnier than you are at that episode. I mean, it just may not be your thing.
I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a place for it while I'm doing something else. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, it's really good for that because it isn't something, and that's why I was like saying I don't think this is meant to like be some sophisticated comedic vehicle that you must appreciate because it is very much like you can have it on in the background.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll let Anthony Carboni go so that we don't ruin House of Cards for him because someday he will have a lobotomy and want to watch it.
How dare you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I screwed everything up. Thank you so much for hanging with us, Anthony. You did a great job as always.
Guys.
Absolutely.
Go check out We Have Concerns at wehaveconcerns.com. Anything else, Anthony, before we let you go?
Nope, just my Twitter at @Carboni.
It's Carboni with an I at the end for those of you who didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, see you later, man.
Later, guys.
Thanks for being on.
Finally got rid of that dead weight. We could talk about important stuff. He's gone from my heart. That's all that matters.
You have a Anthony Carboni-shaped hole in your heart?
Yeah, that only 30 Rock can fill, apparently.
All right, let's move on to House of Cards, which more than Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt surprised me in my binging on it. And it was funny when you're like, we watched all of it. Because I was like, oh, I've watched all but the last episode. Great. Now I have a reason to watch the last episode and not feel bad. I really got pulled into it. I don't know. After like episode 6, I just wanted to keep watching it.
Yeah, first of all, I adore the heavy emphasis on Doug Stamper's character, somebody who played a robot in the first 2 seasons, feels strangely human, however, also capable of dark things. Over the last few episodes, we see him, I believe, around episode 6, we see him walk into the Oval Office and admit that he's currently drunk and has fallen off the wagon, which obviously surprises Frank Underwood.
Were they just ripping off Flight, though, at that point? I'm drunk right now.
It did actually kind of feel like that.
That's what it made me think.
That's a haunting moment in Flight. I tweeted about this, but I sat down to Flight with a beer in my hand and did not get up for another beer once that one was gone. It was a dark movie, dark moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it definitely felt like that. It's weird because much like Frank Underwood is beyond redemption, we see him murder people with his hands. We see him manipulate people. And it's weird to try to make him a sympathetic character because starting from episode 6 on, we start to see the campaign and we see how morally superior Dunbar is. She is the right person. And yet we find ourselves in the awkward place of our main character being a reprehensible villain but also wanting to see him continue to be in the story.
But he's also got a principled goal, right? He's not a principled person. He's not nearly as moral as Dunbar, but he's got the America Works program, right? And so that's like the one thing that he can say, no, but this is really going to help people. This is going to be my thing, even though maybe he's doing it for all the wrong reasons.
Yes. Well, okay. So I loved all of the, and by the way, such a brilliantly timed release schedule to where it's like just as we're seeing the first initial announcements of candidacy, when we're about to enter a phase when we're all going to be obsessed with Iowa and New Hampshire and the next presidency in 2016. The fact that they're moving into the future with all that is brilliant because it's tapping into that gestalt that we all have of, and specifically here in America as we enter election season. I love the fact that Dunbar in every way keeps proving that she is a just and moral person who refuses.
And competent too, right? Like not just immoral.
Well, and quietly competent in a way where she's like, yeah, no, we get it. You're trying to wheel and deal. By the way, this justice has been practically a dad to me, so we don't know what ridiculous game you're playing, but it's not going to affect us. Your Jedi mind tricks don't work on me.
And no, Jackie, I'm not going to offer you anything. If you want to be on my ticket, you'll be on my ticket because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And to have somebody who's like that had honestly not occurred to her. And that was a great moment when she revealed and came out swinging for Dunbar. I thought that was really cool. I enjoy seeing Remy twist with the fact that he's still clearly in love with Jackie. And help me remember this. Did we see in season 2 like a specific breakup moment? Or it was like they had a dalliance and then just we come back in season 3 and assume that fell apart at some point? Because I don't remember them saying,
no,
we
there
can't
is
do
there
this.
is a definitive point where she starts dating the guy and they have a conversation about how he really would make a great campaign husband, wouldn't he? And they've never had a formal relationship, so they just kind of there's sort of a unspoken understanding of like, yeah, I'm gonna go marry him, and he's like, oh well, yeah, you should. That makes sense for your career.
Yeah. Okay. So there was not like a big blow up moment or confession.
I don't think so. No, not
of
at all.
Yeah. Loved I twisted in agony for the racial tension moment. The fact that, Remy gets pulled over, it's a black man in a nice car, and he reaches out to the police officer, says brother, and then and it's like, it's like, I'm not your brother, I'm a law enforcement officer, and it's like the painful way that unfolded was amazing. And then there was an echo of that later on. What was it? There's another moment that one of them calls. When he's talking to the groundskeeper, the guy who ran the rib joint, and there's a twist on that where it's like he asks Remy, "Hey, I don't want to have to listen to Mopey McBaggage. I've got real work to do. Can you cover for me?" And Remy's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." He's like, "Thank you, brother." It's this weird kind of echo.
I'll cover
of that
for you
moment.
by quitting in the next 15 minutes, though. I mean that storyline just kind of petered out for me.
All right, man. Again, I have binge syndrome, and that I just watched them all straight through, so it's hard for me to remember that one episode as a standalone moment.
Well, because I thought I was waiting for the significance of that, right? I felt like that was a handing of the torch. He's like, I'm the guy from the rib joint. I used to listen to him. I used to be his ear. It's important for someone to do that, but I can't do that anymore, and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm handing it over to you, Remy. And I don't know, maybe the significance is that Remy goes, great, I don't want that either. Goodbye. I'm out of here.
Well, I didn't read into it as a handing off of the baton. I read it as like, yeah, can you cover for me for 5 minutes so I can get some actual work done? That's what I figured it was.
Yeah, but I mean, why would he need 5 minutes? I don't know. It just seemed they spent that much time on it. It felt like, okay, this is supposed to be significant to Frank. And there were a few things like that I felt like and Remy's story particularly kind of bugged me after I was done. I loved it all the way through, but after I was done, I'm like, okay, so he's just off on his own now. I guess if we get a season 4, then we've got a loose Remy in the wind who knows a lot of things, and that could be an issue. But I didn't feel like his story had a payoff in this particular season.
But it might also be just sort of retiring a character that didn't really have much to offer the story. It may be that this is when he, goes into his Jules moment at the end of Pulp Fiction where he's going to walk the earth and, we don't see him until maybe he shows up for some crazy circumstance. I do want to talk about the last episode, and I thought it was a peculiarly disappointing ending. It was
abrupt.
It was I felt like we saw it coming a mile away. I feel like it was.
We saw it coming a lot of times a mile away, and then it didn't happen. So when it happened, it felt like, why now?
To me, okay. Let me. Here's the context in which I'm seeing this. Claire leaving Francis is like, finally, whatever. The genuine surprise was the harsh snapping of Stamper letting what's her name go, and then having a moment, turning back around, and you think, oh, he's going to give her a ride into town. Cut to dirt on a corpse's face. That was a shocking moment, and I feel like those two should have switched.
That is actually one storyline that I thought was well done, because and it would have still been well done if he'd driven away, but I would have felt like, oh, okay, that means Stamper is not is still that guy who feels a little too much. And what that showed was Stamper is like, no, I killed that part of myself during recovery. I am stronger than booze now. I am stronger than sentiment. I am the person, I am the tool with which someone in power needs to wield.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been a stronger episode if they had ended with that pop. Now, the only problem, of course, is that you're ending a season on what's ostensibly a minor character's note, but that was a genuine surprise that felt like a gut punch to me. Whereas her saying, I'm leaving you, and walking off, it's like, well, okay, we all saw that coming. Thank you.
Exactly. And that's why I felt like I didn't get enough like, oh, she might really leave him for good this time. I really felt like, oh, she's not going to leave him again. And then she did. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be surprised, but I'm really just confused because I didn't, maybe I lost the plot too, personally as a viewer, but I just didn't quite see like why this time. I didn't really get it. I know that she realized that part of her true feelings had come out when she talked to the writer. And I know she felt like, Frank disappointed her when she tried to make him take charge, and then he took charge in the wrong place and he was just sort of weird. Like, I get all of that. And that could be enough. I don't know, and probably just me, but I was like, I'm not following the thought process here, why these particular events are the ones that made her realize it and not other just as weird or awful events in the past.
So here's the weird place I find myself in, is I'm adrift and I don't know who my anchor is in this show. In the beginning, it was Frank Underwood, and we understood that he was morally reprehensible, but he was our tour guide to take us through everything. Nowadays, it's like he's not somebody who is pulling all the strings, running everything. It's clear that they've humanized him in a number of different ways. We've seen him be weak and vulnerable. It's clear he doesn't have a master plan. It's clear he doesn't have everything under control. Unlike, for example, in The Shield, Vic Mackey, is unflappable. There's never a time you see doubt in him. Nothing flaps him. Nothing rattles him. But we don't get that with Frank Underwood, and we start to see the perspective from other people. And you can have a show that works. For example, Game of Thrones. It's like we are adrift in Game of Thrones. They're all assholes. We don't understand how any of them are going to get ahead. We constantly expect betrayal and all this stuff. And it's delightful because it's balanced. Whereas, but Game of Thrones doesn't have one character continuing to turn to the camera and talk to us directly and remind us that he is the center of this story. If it's Frank Underwood's story, it is a much more confusing and meandering story than it would be if we didn't have that linchpin of him talking to us directly. Does that make sense?
So now you want more structure. And I'm not trying to be snotty when I say that. I'm just saying, like, this is the opposite problem from Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt for you, which is like, that's too much. This is like, hey, you had a structure, and now you're just kind of letting it fall apart, and I'm not sure where we're supposed to go with it.
Well, and I think that's a fair way to put it, and maybe it is hypocritical, but the structure
I don't think it's hypocritical
about,
at all. It's more like you can have too much or you can have not enough, and we got two different examples here.
Yeah, and I understand the desire, and number one, it's clear from the end of season 3 that this is not something that's going to end at season 3 like we were talking about. And in fact, it didn't happen this season, but your prediction of Claire running for president or running for office or something, or at some level being a player, like, I don't know, it makes me wonder if season 4 is going to end up, because there's no way in the middle of a divorce he's able to, win the presidency, right?
And there's a couple of things, and to your point, I don't have the problems with not knowing who to follow. To me, it feels like, if we had stuck with Frank the whole time, it would have got boring. So we have to add in Stamper's story, and we have to add in Claire's story, and I'm fine with that. But I think what I'm reacting to, which may be similar, is Frank seems to not be the same Frank. And I know part of what they're trying to tell is when someone becomes president, the office becomes bigger than them, no matter who they are. Frank was at his most powerful when he was the whip in Congress, right? And the more power he gets, the less competent and confident he can be, because he doesn't have as much room to move. And I think that's fair, but I was disappointed, like, especially in his dealings with the Russian president. I felt like that's not what I think Frank would do. Like, he's cleverer than that. I was waiting for him to pull off the brilliant moves, and they don't always have to work, but I felt like a lot of times he just kind of got almost whiny.
We saw a bit of that, and that was my least favorite part of season 2. I think season 2 had a lot more of it because there was so much like of him twisting and getting bullied around in the role of vice president. Here's what's interesting about season 3 is we've always seen Frank handling people. We've never seen him turn that routine on Claire until this season. And it's not until like halfway through that you start to realize it becomes more and more overt. Like, oh, he's just doing his routine on her now, treating her like everyone else. And
she was always on his side, helping him handle people. And then she was starting to be a person that he needed to handle. And that starts to make her reaction feel more explainable.
Yes. And it makes sense that she would leave. I really dug the
Stamper.
Doug Stamper. I dug the writer's angle on things where he turns on this overt sexuality to Frank Underwood, in the effort to, and I don't know how much of his story is true from his perspective or not, but when he starts saying like, well, I'm just addicted. I need the truth. I need access. I need to be inside. And I need to be inside of you. Frank Underwood.
His character verged a little bit on Deus Ex Machina, like, hey, let's just put a perspective character for the viewer here to ask all the questions and get all the answers. I don't think they misused that, and there's a place for that kind of character, and they needed it. So I was cool with him. Although, again, that's another storyline where I feel like, okay, maybe we're going to get more. Again, maybe we'll get more in the next season. But I thought we were going to get something more out of that character in this season. The other thing I want to bring up is everything they've done has had a parallel in history until Claire walks out.
Oh, that's interesting.
You could say, that's stolen from Gerald Ford. That's a Kennedy moment. That's a Clinton moment. This is what George Bush dealt with. This is what Barack Obama's been dealing with. Everything has got a parallel. And I thought, that's the one huge strength of this writing team is they are able to reference so much history and mash it up into one storyline in a believable way that I just think is incredibly impressive. Except for that, that's the one time they've taken a risk. Like no sitting president has had his wife walk out of the White House that we know of ever.
Yeah. It'll be, I think this is an unfair assessment. And I disagree with it even as I'm saying it. I feel like art shouldn't go this way, but I will know how to feel about season 3 after I have the benefit of watching season 4. And for right now, I just don't know how to feel. Yeah,
no,
that's unfair because it should stand on its own, but I feel like I can't extract it from where things are headed.
No, I feel the same way on a lot of those threads. Cass in the chat room says, you guys are assuming she will actually leave or that Frank will let her. I'll be honest, Cass, if she doesn't leave or if Frank doesn't let her, I will be very disappointed.
Yeah.
Because to me as a storyteller, if you end a season on that big revelation and then the next episode, Frank just runs downstairs and goes, no, honey, let's work this out. And she doesn't leave. I feel like that was a big waste. And so she almost has to leave for this to work.
In fact, my prediction is, as we've seen in between seasons, we jump forward by several months. I could totally see he's now in the final days of the campaign, beleaguered, hit on all sides.
I think it's also possible that she doesn't tell anyone that she left, right? And that's a dirty little secret they're trying to keep the lid on. She might play the game that well because there's reasons for her to benefit from doing that.
Yeah.
Then again, she might not. I don't know. And that's what I like. What I like about them taking that risk is I don't know where that's going. I can't look at history and go, well, probably what they'll end up doing is taking it somewhere similar to those events. There's no event like that.
By the way, that's the dragon we're all chasing is surprise, genuinely not knowing where stuff's going and then being impressed with the result. And they have done a very good job of making it clear that anything is possible.
Crucial Wax said her leaving Frank is to establish power over him and she'll use that, not let it go. I think that's fair. That doesn't mean she'll come back, but she might be willing to play along because she can get something out of it.
That's interesting. What if in season 4... she is not someone to be handled, but instead someone who Frank genuinely fears. Oh, by the way, did you notice how many episodes were directed by Robin Wright?
Yeah, I did.
I thought that was fantastic.
And they were really good, too.
Yeah, they were great episodes. Very good.
Maybe that's why she's leaving Frank. She's like, I just can't be on screen.
Yeah, you're like, listen, do you know how hard it is to run this show? Come on.
But overall, you know what? I was pulled in, and this was the thing about House of Cards the second half of this season. I constantly wanted to watch the next episode. After episode 8, particularly, I was like, gotta watch the next episode. Gotta watch the next episode. They gave me a reason every time to want to jump in. At the same time, the episodes were very, and I don't want to say standalone, but they were very self-contained. They were good, solid stories all on their own. It wasn't like they were just stringing a story across.
Yeah,
it
wasn't as obviously episodic narrative as I don't want to go so far as to call them procedurals, but it's like I agree, they did kind of stand on their own. Hey man, you want to wrap up talking about the Shield?
Yeah, let's do it. Shield season 3, episode 5.
Season 4, right?
No, season 5.
Oh, season 5. You said season 3. Episode
Did I
5.
say that?
Yeah.
I meant episode 3
there you go.
of season 5.
You got it.
And this is Jailbait. The strike team figures out their next concerning internal affairs investigation into Lemensky, because at the end of the last episode I watched, Lem ripped out the cord and told Vic. And so now they all know. And so basically Vic has to go to the rest of the strike team and say, okay, watch what you say around Lem. Vic's wife figures out that Kavanaugh, Forrest Whitaker's character, isn't who he says he is. And so now she knows that he's investigating Vic because, of course, Vic now, because of Lem, knows that Kavanaugh is investigating him. And Wagenbach feels betrayed by Wims when she reopens one of his cases. Turns out to be right. And he meets the guy who's sort of hitting on him, who reads facial expressions, who tells him she's hiding something. So now we're even more intrigued about Wims, because it's not just that she's acting weird and kind of phoning it in, but she's not always phoning it in, because she makes him reopen a case. And then the facial recognition guy says that there's something more going on with Wims. So
she hasn't said what it is, right?
Nope.
There's okay, all right.
Nah, is there anything? I don't know. Wims hasn't said a thing. That's just that gay guy who was hitting on Wagenbach.
I mean,
and Wims the one that tells Wagenbach, like, he's hitting on you, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say anything about it, except whatever. I don't want to say.
We have the prosecutor to show back up and get in a deal with Vic Mackey, where he tries to get. He's like, "Look, you need to defend her so we can question her right away." And then she sort of turns the tables on him, and it's like, well, then, you owe me something now.
All right. Well, but the only thing I'm going to say about this, and by the way, we do have to get back. We forgot to talk about Better Call Saul. I will say that now you are entering my favorite phase of the entire series. Lemansky is, I think, the most relatable character on the strike team. He is somebody with a conscience. He's somebody that we could project ourselves into, somebody who was on the outside of the initial murder, somebody who is doing his best to, who doesn't know exactly how deep it goes with Shane and Vic, who twists and agonizes about his role to the tune of shoveling all the money train money into the furnace, and where he goes now as he gets embroiled in this web and tries to, and his loyalty to his friends is tempered against his loyalty to his position as a police officer, just gets better and better. It becomes
You've got
agonizing.
Aceveda on the other end telling Kavanaugh he's messing up the investigation, and Kavanaugh saying, you're the one who messed up the investigation, and Aceveda saying, you don't know Vic Mackey. You think you do, but you don't. And you've got, and I don't know who to believe at this point. Like, gosh, I want to believe Kavanaugh because he seems so competent and smart, and Aceveda really is kind of spineless sometimes, but I also know that Kavanaugh doesn't know Vic Mackey, and I do now after 5 seasons. Let me tell you, Vic Mackey does not do what you expect him to, whether you're Kavanaugh or not.
It's good. It's good. It's good. Very excited to watch you go from here. Let's talk about Better Call Saul.
Yeah, so now we got back into the run of things. It's not just a flashback episode. It's not all about Mike, but we are now starting to see the slow motion coalescing of the things that will turn Slip and Jimmy from Jimmy the reformed attorney into Saul. Like I could just see the pieces coming together now.
Yeah, you see elements. He recruits Mike to distract is it the Kavanaughs? Is that their names? Or no, the Kittermans.
The Kettlemans.
Kettlemans. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what it was. To distract them and to get the money in order to offer them the deal. You also see him in a morally superior position to do quote unquote the right thing, the title of the episode, and in return all of the money and do the hard thing and give up his dream of having that big office and getting the cute girl, hiring her away from the hated law firm, and instead recommend that the Kettlemans go to them. It's another good episode. I'm kind of glad to see the Kettleman thing essentially be like that. That was a nice little 4-chapter arc, and maybe we'll see more for them. But by and large,
exactly. I'm agreeing with you that it was like, okay, we could have strung that thing out too long. But I don't think that's the last of the Kettlemans, especially Mrs. Kettleman. I don't think Mr. Kettleman's good for anything, but she is not going to forget that slight that just happened to her.
Yeah, and how great is the nonverbal way that they established that Mr. Kettleman is just a beleaguered, defeated man whose overbearing wife is pushing him around and everything.
He's Walter White.
Yes.
Breaking Bad, right?
Well, and plus there was.
So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's the one that comes out of this.
Oh, wouldn't that be interesting? Somebody pointed out on some review that that there's hints that it was interesting that the money was located in like an echo of where Walter White kept his money, in a similar place. I forget which one was where, but yeah, I thought it was great.
And I think that when they were up in that tower and they're looking at the office, I was like, okay, he doesn't get this office. I don't know how, but we all know he ends up in a strip mall. So I don't think he ends up with this office, or if he does, he's not going to stick there for very long. And it was kind of gnawing at me. So when he went to the money, I was like, oh, he's going to give it back. And that's why I opened our conversation by like, this is the episode where we see the conditions set. Like this is how this guy becomes Saul Goodman. It just makes sense.
And plus, even I'll have to rewatch it again to be sure, but it's like even during Breaking Bad, there were clear lines. Like, I will do this as long as we can dress it up this way. And we can all agree this is technically what I'm doing. And then it's like, I will not do it if it is clearly this. And then there were times he gets pushed by circumstance over there. I don't know, man. Here's the question is, he's a footnote and a joke in Breaking Bad, but he's our protagonist in this story. How long? And right now we're at a point in his arc where he is our likable anchor. He is the person we relate to and see everything through his eyes. How do you think that's how it is the entire run of this series? Or do you think there's a point that we lose him the way we lost Walter White?
Yeah, I feel like what we're going to see with Jimmy McGill is him constantly having to balance that equation that you were talking about. I will do this, but I will not do this. And that line right now is very high up. He will almost not do anything. I'll take the money if you call it a retainer, right? That's pretty white lie level stuff, right? It's not that bad against what we know Saul Goodman ends up doing by Breaking Bad time. So I think this story is how that line continuously just moves. And he's like, well, I guess I can do that, but I won't do this. And then he has to do that. Well, I do that, but I would never do this. And we're going to see that line shifting more and more, and his rationalizations getting more and more elaborate. I think we see his relationship with the woman from Hamlin break down because of it. I think we see his relationship with his brother break down because of it. And I think at the same time, he's not going to be the only character the story is about. I know we're going to see more about Mike's character and how Mike turns into who he is and why he and Jimmy have an ongoing relationship. And I bet we're going to get more characters.
Yes. And I do believe we're going to see more and more. The more I think about it, the more I think that by the third season, we're going to be caught up in real time and the future all takes place up in Nebraska.
I don't think that ever happens. I really don't. I'm less convinced of that now than ever before.
I disagree because otherwise I don't know where things end. Like with Walter White, we saw a noose tightening until there was only one way for things to end, or one of two ways for things to end. I don't know how you do that in a case where, unless Jimmy's brother becomes the focus of everything, and it's a matter of what happens to him.
Well, there's one way to end it is he becomes Saul Goodman, right? There is that looming question where we're like, yeah, but he's still Jimmy. When does he become Saul? So that may be the breaking point of like why does he finally have to change his name and become Saul Goodman? I think that's one place you go with that. And the other is like just ending with the first time Walter White shows up in his life, and we're like, oh crap. So that's where that went.
Real quick, one last question. Jackie Hearn, the host of Lawyer Up podcast, all about Better Call Saul. Make sure to check that out. She asks in the chat, she had one question for me about the Bob Barker mic that he's using it during the bingo game. He says, apparently it was difficult for the prop unit to find them, but we used one on Hacking the System where they're really hard to find. I do remember from that shoot, and thankfully, it wasn't my job to find that stuff, but I remember them handing it to me like, this was very expensive. Please take care of it. And so I wouldn't doubt that for a second, that they're fairly rare.
They handed it to Brian and said, Bob Barker doesn't know we have this, and we need to get it back by 5 p.m.
Funny side note is I believe, I was mic'd during that. I believe that that we were missing some piece of equipment to make that work, but we loved how it looked. So I mainly just held it as a prop, and we used boom mics and stuff for the actual audio. I don't believe we were capturing audio from it, and they probably did the same thing. I don't know.
Well, there you go, folks. Consider yourselves spoiled. Thanks for spending some time with us. We appreciate it.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.